This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by AIM EC Herbicide from FMC. Power up your spring burnoff and savings with AIM EC Herbicide. Control the toughest weeds, plus get $4 off per acre with the ACE Resistant Weeds program. Visit ag.fmc.com for more.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the program. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Had a great week in Saskatchewan, a Western Canadian crop production show. Ran into so many fans of RealAgriculture.com, RealAg Radio, RealAg on the weekend, the agronomists. Just really appreciate everybody that took the time to say hello and talk to me and tell me stories about their farm. That's actually one of the best parts of getting a chance to interact with you, the audience. Today's show is brought to you by Vaderstad. Now, you can go to Vaderstad.com. Encourage you to do so. They got a great lineup of products, and you're partnering with Canadian farmers for outstanding emergence. Their line of tillage, seeding, and planting equipment offers solutions for all soil types, field conditions, and tillage practices, helping you to maximize yields. You can learn more and find your local dealer by going to Vaderstad.com. Today on the show, we are going to hear from Vaderstad talking about, hey, what's on tap in the new product lineup? And they've had a very successful year this year from a sales perspective. What's different about Vaderstad versus some of the other competitors in the marketplace? And then we've got time today for a RealAg Issues Panel. We got Evan Shout with farmer coach at Maverick Ag, host of the Truth About Ag podcast. He'll be joining us. Andrew Campbell from Strathroy, Ontario, Fresh Air Media will be with us, as well as Kelvin Heppner, like always, from RealAgriculture. Now, if you have any feedback, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Keep that feedback and those questions and that commentary coming. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to hear from Philip from Vaderstad right after this. Farm smarter with SGS. Our expert seed testing ensures your crops start strong and thrive. From germination to vigor to disease testing, SGS delivers results you can trust. Plus, we've added new wheat midge refuge varieties perfect for seed growers. Need precision? Explore our seed testing packages with built-in savings. Call us today at 1-800-952-5407 or visit cropscience.sgs.ca. SGS, when you need to be sure.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Shaun Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on Sirius XM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today.
It's now time on RealAg Radio for a product spotlight with Vaderstad. We're joined right now by Vaderstad's Director of Sales for Western Canada. It is Philip Korczak. Hey, Philip, how's it going?
Good morning, Shaun. I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. It is 2025. Seeding and planting will be here before you know it. Now, we've been talking a lot on RealAg Radio here about some of the struggles and, some of the cutbacks farmers are engaging in when it comes to equipment sales. No secret. The numbers don't lie. I understand that Vaderstad was actually able to sell out of all their production for 2025. What allowed Vaderstad to make this happen and have some success in a year where we're hearing so much about industry struggles?
Yeah, that's a great question, Shaun. Honestly, it's a combination of multiple factors, but what it boils down to at the end of the day is that we still have a product that has demand in the marketplace that we have not been able to fulfill that complete demand over the last several years. So there's been pent-up demand for our product coming out of COVID, coming out of some of the supply chain issues that we saw. Obviously, there's been a downturn in the industry globally, which Vaderstad Global is not unaffected by that, but Western Canada has been a highlight for us that, just like you said, we were able to still capture sales from our customer base that's looking for our equipment, looking for our product, looking for the consistent high quality product that we put out with the Seed Hawk line of seeding tools and precision delivery tanks. And honestly, we're very fortunate that we're still a product that's in demand, and customers still saw the value in looking at our products for this coming spring of 2025.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of the line of products that Vaderstad is very well known for. We really enjoyed our time with Vaderstad at Agritechnica at the last exhibition, and seeing some of those innovations and some of those, where the thought process is going forward. Obviously, farmers are going to have an opportunity with Crop Production Show and Manitoba Ag Days, and going into the fall with Canada's Outdoor Farm Show and places or things like that. What are some of the things that Vaderstad is up to here in 2025?
Yeah, so for your direct audience here in Western Canada, the northern U.S., with our key product in those marketplace, the Seed Hawk and the precision delivery, our focus here over the next couple of months, like you mentioned already, is farm shows. We're into farm show season. January, we'll be at Crop Production in Saskatoon. We'll be at Manitoba Ag Days in Brandon coming up. And then we will have some of our dealers representing us in the shows in the U.S. as well. Minot has a show coming up. Our local dealer will be there as well. So really, we're focused on farm shows. Farm shows, some people can negate the value of farm shows. There's a high cost to going to farm shows. You don't do a lot of actual sales at the farm shows like they maybe would do in Agritechnica, as you mentioned earlier. But for us, it's very important to still be in front of our customers and our dealers. It's a place for those customers to come and interact with our representatives from the factory, our territory managers that cover the individual geographic locations. They're there as well. So that's really important for us. As you mentioned, we are going to be going into this spring season, so making sure that our customer base, our dealer base, is as prepared as possible. And you actually mentioned Agritechnica. Agritechnica will be back for 2025, and we are hoping and planning to have Western Canadian and also U.S. representation at our booth in Vaderstad that we hope to, again, showcase the global suite of Vaderstad products in Germany versus just the specific Western Canadian products. So those are a few of the things that we've got coming up.
Yeah, what are some of the innovations and improvements that customers can look forward to, as we even start to think about what some of that 2026 lineup looks like?
Yeah, so for 2026, with air seeders, obviously you understand, Shaun, that we do our sales almost a full season in advance. So we will be bringing out our model year 26 pricing and programs to our dealers and customers shortly in the spring here in the March timeframe. One of the things that I believe has allowed us to have the success that we had here for model year 25 is that we have really focused over the last 5 years on producing a consistent, high quality product, that it doesn't matter whether it's built on a Monday, a Friday, a Tuesday. It doesn't matter if it's 1-year-old or 5-year-old. It continues to be that high quality product that customers are looking for with the agronomic value. So with that in mind, we actually aren't seeing a lot of major changes for 2026. A couple of the few things that customers will definitely see, though, is we've changed the tire size on our precision delivery tanks. So we had an 800 metric tire that we're now moving to a 900 metric tire. So just a little bit more carrying capacity, a little larger footprint. We are bringing to the customers what we call an in-cab hub for model year 26. And all that means, it's a fancy term for a common connection point with our iPad displays, our GPS receiver, that will be easier and cleaner for the customer inside the cab to really clean those up. We will actually be bringing a new meter bottom to our tanks in model year 26 as well. Just something that's a little bit more robust, a little bit more user-friendly for the customer in terms of changing product flow from seed primary to fertilizer primary, et cetera. So customers and dealers should look forward to that for model year 26 as well.
Great stuff. So if somebody wants more information on any of that and more having to do with the lineup at Vaderstad, where do they find it?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. We always encourage customers to go directly to our distributors. So that would be their local dealer, whether it's their local John Deere, Redhead, New Holland dealer in their local area. By all means, they are our on-the-ground experts because we can't be everywhere. But if you need more information above and beyond that, you're looking for some different information outside of the dealership, obviously our website is a great place to go. So Vaderstad.com. And if you're not following us on social media as well, we're doing quite a bit via social media, whether it's via X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok as well. So any of those are great places to go for more information.
Great stuff. Hey, Philip, thanks for joining us here today on RealAg Radio for this product spotlight, and wish you all the best in 2025.
Great. Thanks for having me, Shaun. You as well.
And make sure you go to Vaderstad's website, as Philip mentioned, as well as talk to your local dealer. Walk in the door and ask about some of the great products from Vaderstad. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM, right after this.
There's power, and then there's superpower. Advancing the unstoppable superpower of pre-seed from New Farm. Take control. Eliminate weed competition and start clean in spring. Manage weeds early in canola, cereals, and pulses. Conquer, Goldwing, Thunderhawk, and Blackhawk EVO. Convenient formulations and multiple modes of action. Add more power to glyphosate, more benefits to your burn down. Go to newfarm.ca/burndown.
Before you get back in the field this year, spend some time with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Get all the information you need on hybrid selection, planting depth, crop inputs, and more from a wide range of industry experts. A massive library of video content is available on demand when you need it most. Spend your time outside of the field, inside the classroom, with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com.
Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada. And welcome back to RealAg Radio, brought to you today by Vaderstad. Vaderstad is partnering with Canadian farmers for outstanding emergence. Their line of tillage, seeding, and planting equipment offers solutions for all soil types, field conditions, and tillage practices, helping you to maximize yield. To learn more and find your local dealer, you can visit Vaderstad.com. Let's bring in the panel here today to talk about, we've got some issues to talk about, things that happened this week. And then what about next week? We got an inauguration on Monday that I'm sure will provide some spice to some of the current event talk around these parts. Joining us first, of course, as always, Kelvin Heppner out of Altona, Manitoba. Kelvin, how are we doing?
Doing well, although I look out the window and I can't see more than 20 feet, and I blame Alberta because we have an Alberta Clipper, a blizzard rolling through here, and Alberta's just stirring things up for the entire country this week, it seems.
I say, well, you know what? You're just like everybody else. Blame Alberta. It's Alberta's fault. Very un-Canadian of you Albertans. So now we're shipping our bad weather to you too.
And a blizzard this way. Kids are happy it's canceled, but they canceled school at like 10 after 8, so kids were already on the bus in many cases when they canceled school this morning. So
they went back and dropped them. The bus just turned around and dropped everybody off again?
Yeah.
Huh. Now, is there anything better in life than a snow day as a kid? Like, those were like the best. Like when it's like, hey, it's snow day, no school. It's like, I got the entire day in front of me. It's awesome. Do you remember those days well, Kelvin, growing up in southern Manitoba?
For sure. We had them often. I even like them as an adult because it's like, well, I guess I got to stay inside and catch up on stuff in the office that I've been putting off for a long, like it's kind of a, it limits what you can do in your schedule, and so you have to, it shakes things up sometimes. It's good.
Well, our other panelist here today, he's fortunate he gets to work in the barn all the time. So, snow, he's like, whatever. I'm inside my cozy dairy barn, doing my milking, living the good life. It is Andrew Campbell coming out of Strathroy, Ontario. How are we doing, Andrew?
I am doing great. It actually, Southern Ontario doesn't help either in the fact that we just don't get snow. We actually, I'm one of the ones that is a terrible father in the fact that they've had buses been canceled probably 4 or 5 days. I think I've sent the kids to school 3 of those anyway. If I'm able to drive you to school, you're gone. So that's my rule.
Yeah. But I'm not going to lie. We did that a few times too. Like, it's
well, what's easier? Like I could give you jobs, but then I'm going to hear you complain about having to do those jobs all day. It seems better that you're at school learning things. That's the reason I want to send them to learn things. It's not the other one. Yes. Sorry.
Also joining us today is Evan Shout coming out of Saskatchewan. Evan, how are we doing?
Oh, I'm good. I mean, crop production week, and we didn't have -40 or 3 feet of snow. It was actually +5. So,
amen.
Yeah, I will take that anytime. And I mean, I was in Texas last week, and it was +20. So I'm living my best life these first 2 weeks.
Things are good. It seems like the good weather's following you around. Yeah, it was nice. I wouldn't. It wasn't warm, but it was like I didn't take a winter jacket to crop production show. I just had a vest. And I walked from the Bez to TCU. And for those of you who know Saskatoon, that's, I don't know, a 15-minute walk. There's lots of years like last year, crop production show, you didn't dare walk half a block or you'd be frozen like an icicle. So nice weather this week. Also, Evan, of course, is the host of the Truth About Ag podcast. You can hear here at RealAgriculture.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, let's dig in here and get to some of the biggest topics of the week. I guess, Evan, you were at Crop Production Show, as you mentioned. What were some of your takeaways, observations from Crop Production Show?
I mean, obviously there's a little pessimism in the air. I mean, looking at machinery is nice when the times are good, but with commodity prices where they are, I don't think it was quite the draw it usually is in that arena, at least. I mean, as I get older, crop production becomes more of a networking event than anything. And I think a lot of farms use it that way of not many times a year you come into the city and you see everybody from everywhere in Western Canada and not have to travel anywhere. So I think that's the big one. I mean, it's become less about the show and more about the people at the show.
Yeah, there is some negativity from a profitability standpoint. Now, Campbell, you were at a farm meeting, you said as well. Where were you at this week?
Dairy Farmers of Ontario's annual meeting in downtown Toronto this week. So
Big 6-0, right?
Big 6-0, 60 years for DFO. Yep.
Did anybody from the Leafs come and speak since you're big sponsors?
We had, who's the mascot?
Carlton?
Bear. Carlton Bear. Arrived. Was it? And actually, we did have Keith Pelly speak at the meeting too. So he was on the agenda, but most of that related much more to, just kind of the business side and, sport and things like that than anything else. So, but no, you know what? It was a meeting where I think there's, the dairy industry has, kind of leveled out in terms of growth the last little bit, but there's some optimism in terms of new processors coming online in Canada, hopefully over the next few years. So there's kind of that like cautious optimism that maybe we're going to see some growth in the dairy world, over the next few years. So I would say people were fine with the way things are.
Concern about what could happen next week?
Honestly, I think it's one of those, we fit in the same category that everybody else does in terms of maybe, but we don't know what to be concerned about yet.
Okay.
I think is the big thing. We don't export from Canada. The numbers were there. We export like $250 million worth of dairy products into the US. Close to $1 billion comes in. So it's not a huge amount of trade. So it really is one of those things that, we're going to kind of go with, we'll kind of put our heads down. There's not a tremendous amount of impact. I think the bigger impact we'll see is, what's it going to do to the beef market? What's that going to do to, kind of cull cow prices, calf prices, things like that. That's the one that really, I think is where the impact is going to be if it's anywhere.
Well, things aren't all rosy here. Just like Kelvin, and I don't have it on my tabs in my car. I got 60 Chrome tabs open, and I can't find the story that we were looking at earlier. The U.S. and others taking issue with some of the Canadian trade practices when it comes to skim proteins again. Do you remember that release from earlier this week?
Yeah, there was a story reported in international media about U.S., New Zealand, Australia, I believe, the usual suspects there complaining about Canada putting skim milk proteins into global markets. I don't know the details of that. That's something that was certainly a big issue during the last CUSMA USMCA renegotiation, and there were measures implemented there that prevented Canada from selling some of that. What was it? Class 10 at the time was the
7. Yeah,
category.
7.
Class 7.
Yeah.
Okay, that we were talking about that. So
yeah. Well, I'm going to put Campbell on the spot.
Yeah.
Okay. So Campbell, I was at the Milk Business Conference, which is a meeting in December in Vegas every year. The large west side of the United States dairy, large dairies. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I was on a panel and with some ag economists. I'm not sure I didn't have some of the credentials of some of those people, but I tried to provide some of the Canadian perspective. And one of the things that I heard that kind of surprised me, and I've heard it from other people in the U.S. too, is that the ask from the U.S. potentially might not actually be more market access like a lot of people are expecting. It might actually be just, Canada live up to our definition of the last trade agreement that we agreed to, where Canada, there's been some dispute challenges on the definition of how the TRQs are allocated. Mm-hmm. My quick response, and maybe I've got it wrong, so I want your opinion on this. My response was, if that's the ask, where do I sign? Because that seems like less of an ask than, hey, we need to double what we asked for last time. What's your response to that?
Well, I think it's one of those, and this is always the challenge that we run into when it comes to these trade agreements, always runs into, everybody defines it and goes away and says, okay, this is what we believe the definition is. And this is the challenge that we're having with these allocation of TRQs is Canada came away thinking this, the US came away thinking this, and they don't exactly align. And a lot of it just has to align with who actually gets those, who's responsible for those TRQs. That's the biggest thing. And so is it a case of, I have not heard exactly what their ask will be. And I think for a lot of the conversations that we had over the last, few days were a lot of there's a lot of other people in line with a lot of other asks. That I think for us, we're just kind of in that wait and see perspective to be, if auto is a target, if lumber is a target, if steel is a target, if, a whole host of other things is a target that frankly probably rank as higher priorities to deal with first. Yeah. I think the perspective is let's deal with those ones because that trade back and forth isn't nearly as impactful as some of these other sectors where those trucks are running back and forth multiple times before an end product is actually produced.
Yeah, Evan, what was your sense from Crop Production Show this week? And talking to some of your farmer coach clients, what are they saying about some of the exposure here from a trade perspective on the commodities they're producing?
I think it's not a lot different. I mean, we're just in a waiting pattern. I mean, the Canadian dollar obviously has a few people concerned, whether it's on the cost side or the commodity side. I mean, we're sitting with prices that we're calling depressed right now, but at the same time, we've got a really low Canadian dollar. So what could they be if we didn't have that? So I mean, there's some concern on that side. And I mean, obviously, like I said, the manufacturing, the equipment side, guys are pretty much shutting off the capital plans right now, which I think we're starting to see. I mean, the manufacturers are starting to gear up for a slower year because producers just don't have the access to capital and maybe even the appetite to do the investment going into a year where right now, aside from canola and some pulse, I mean, the cereals are looking ugly right now. I mean, it's not a real positive sentiment right now unless something shifts here.
Yeah. I showed, Evan, you wwere at my presentation yesterday. Yeah. And I showed some numbers. There were U.S. numbers on a loss per acre. Ugly.
Well, and the Canadian ones aren't much different, to be fair, Shaun. I mean, like I said, canola might show a small profit with an average yield and lentils and pulse, but the cereals, I would love to tell guys to go canola, snow canola, but we know that doesn't work. So, I mean, it's going to be an interesting crop mix.
Okay, so Alberta sent a clipper the direction of Manitoba. As Kelvin indicated, that wasn't the only controversial thing that Alberta did this week. We're going to discuss that. Who agrees with Alberta and who doesn't? What does Team Canada need to really do when we come back? You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, brought to you today by Vaderstad.
What's next doesn't happen by accident and doesn't happen by chance.
What's next happens when experience meets expertise, when data meets dollars, and when steel meets earth.
What's next happens when the promising work of Pioneer's state-of-the-art research centers meets the unsparing challenges of more than 17,000 on-farm trials.
Our ultimate goal is to bring the next seed breakthrough to your field.
Because Pioneer isn't just our name.
It's our mission. Pioneer.
What's next
happens here.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio, brought to you today by Vaderstad. Make sure you go to Vaderstad.com. We saw them at Western Canadian Crop Production Show this week. Some fantastic products, technologies, innovations that you need to be considering for your farming operation. And of course, in Canada, but as well as, North Dakota, Montana as well. So please check it out, Vaderstad.com. Okay, let's talk about Alberta. Kelvin, Alberta ruffled some feathers this week. Team Canada is not all on the same page. What was your impression of what we heard this week?
Well, I think I understand where everybody's coming from in terms of the positions. We saw the premiers meet with the prime minister. This is actually the first time that Justin Trudeau had sat down with the premiers in a long time. They had this meeting on Wednesday to talk about the looming tariff threat, and all the premiers were in the room except for two of them. BC's David Eby joined virtually, and Danielle Smith, the premier of Alberta, was in Panama, I believe, on vacation, participating from there. And so at the end of the meeting, they all signed a joint statement except for Danielle Smith, saying that everything is on the table in terms of options for retaliating against the U.S. or taking measures to mitigate the impact of tariffs. And so the issue there is that the federal government continues to float the idea of export taxes or export tariffs, restrictions, specifically on Alberta energy, and Danielle Smith is refusing to agree to that, which I completely understand. I also understand why Doug Ford and the rest of the premiers say that Canada needs to stand united. So it is, it's to me, the disappointing part is that maybe this didn't have to play out in public and could have been dealt with internally in terms of if one part of the country has to bear significantly more than another part, Alberta shouldn't have to bear significantly more than Ontario or any other province. And especially when you consider the history of this issue, Alberta has 45, 50 years of energy policy directed from Ottawa that has Albertans feel has hurt their energy industry, whether you look at the National Energy Program blocking pipelines. And so to me, there should have been a way to
Energy East,
exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean. Blocking pipelines, balance of transfer payments. If we look outside of energy policy specifically, so to me, there could have been a way though of sharing that burden across the provinces and regions of the country that could have been negotiated behind the scenes, so that they could still present a united front and not take this card off the table, even if you're never intending to play this card. We were just talking about dairy, and you go back to the criticism of Bill C-282. One of the main criticisms we had of this bill that was supposed to take supply management off the table in trade negotiations was that it takes a card off the table. It gives the other side an advantage in terms of knowing that you're not going to talk about that. Well, doesn't the same logic apply here too? Why take this card off the table, even if behind the scenes you have an agreement, we're not actually going to do this, that kind of thing? I don't know, unless Danielle Smith felt that wasn't a possible scenario.
Yeah, I got an email this morning from Alberta Energy Minister, and basically saying, hey, where is Team Canada now? Ottawa has imposed Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines Act, an unconstitutional production cap is another one. Like there's a pretty long list of here. British Columbia block pipelines, Energy East you already mentioned. Yeah, so it's
a sensitive issue, and at the same time, Doug Ford is standing up for his auto sector, and of course, he's not sacrificing the auto sector for national unity here to have to stay united. So I understand I understand kind of where everybody's coming from here. It's just, to me, it would have been nice if it could have been a united front and that this could have been negotiated and dealt with behind the scenes, not on the international stage where that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, Andrew, one of the points that Alberta's making, and Smith did I don't know, she was like laying in a closet. It was a weird video that she filmed where said she was irritated, and she was talking about how the fact, like, we should not threaten to cut off Alberta energy exports to punish the U.S. when we can't actually follow through with it, because there's this thing called Line 5 and Line 9 that supply energy to Quebec and Ontario, which would be very easy. And remember, Michigan Governor Whitmer has already threatened the shut off of these lines already in the past. So it would be very easy for the U.S. to retaliate, completely cutting off some energy resources for Ontario and Quebec. So does that make sense, or what are your thoughts?
I think I kind of line up a lot with Kelvin on it in terms of, can't we deal with this quietly? I very much understand why we don't want to get in the way, or don't want to put on the table, especially early, export restrictions. I think there's a lot of cases to say we don't want to put export restrictions on ever. But I think it's one of those things that it takes so much away from the conversation when we're only talking about one issue. We have piles of things that we could be talking about in terms of what tariffs we're going to target, where they're going to line up, what we can restrict, what we won't, all of those types of things, that now this hijacks that entire conversation over one thing that we probably wouldn't do in the first place ever anyway. So I think it's one of those that, the interview I saw was with, Newfoundland Premier Andrew Furey, and it was very much a case of he doesn't want it either. He in no way wants to see that, but he also understands that, we need to come out united with it. And I think that's just one of those things that as we go into this, before we even know what some of these tariffs are going to line up like, we already can't agree. And I think that's going to create a challenge going into next week once we do actually see a rollout of whatever it is that's going to happen, is we're already starting from a place that we don't look like we know what we're doing.
Yeah.
I believe Fury talked about how we're playing chess and we don't want to expose our queen up front.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. And quite frankly, I don't think there is a scenario that I would ever see that I would think export restrictions are a good idea. Like, no question that way. But it is one of those things that, if that's, as you said, Kelvin, if that's a conversation you have in private, then you can come out and say everything's on the table. The media says even export restrictions, and you don't play it up. You just simply say everything is on the table, and just leave it there.
Evan, go ahead.
So how much of this is posturing? I mean, we've seen, especially from Danielle, I mean, she's pushing hard. I mean, we've seen her on all the social media networks. Obviously, this got leaked. I mean, she did her video. I'm just wondering, I mean, all the videos with Trump and Leary and everybody else, like, how much of this is her, honestly, like we say, I agree it should be in private, but I don't think she wants it in private. I think she wants it publicly, because I think it's pushing her legacy of what she's trying to do right now, to be fair.
What I found super interesting is and I get the suggestion, but the lack of reality. Like, so they did the press conference, and to be honest with you, like, Wab Kinew, Premier from Manitoba, was fantastic. Like, his ability to communicate, his smile is electric. Sorry, go ahead,
The Liberals better hope he doesn't run for federal NDP, because I think the Liberal Party might be in the wilderness even longer if someday he runs.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. No. Absolutely. I agree with you. The challenge, though, is that he was talking about, we all need to vacation, stay here and vacation in Manitoba. They were joking that other provinces would say the same thing. And we need to buy Canadian. Again, we're not being honest with ourselves.
Nope.
The consumer is not going to chew us out of this. They're like, yes, it felt a little bit a la BSE in 2003. We can only consume that much red meat for so long. Like, what is our ask here? It's the math does not work out. Just like the U.S.
Good politics. It's good political messaging, man.
Yeah, it is. But sure, let's do that, and then we'll see how it works out for us.
Well, and the other problem I have is that, I mean, we went over to COP28 and Christian went over on the Saskatchewan delegate, and where was Team Canada on that one? I mean, like, we're trying to posture this, and at the same time as we're over there, he doesn't talk about agriculture, and they throw out their emissions targets and stuff like that. Like, it's this Team Canada idea, I agree with it, but at the same time, there's been no indication from the east to the west that it's even there. So
Team
why
Canada when it's standing up for Ontario, it seems like, from the west.
Yeah, so why would
yes.
Danielle?
Well, and this is where I do think that this is where all of what Trudeau's legacy in terms of trying to set what his priorities were that didn't line up with Western Canada are now coming home to roost. Like, he alienated way too many of these relationships that now when we need them, like, of course they're not good. I know why they aren't. And I think it is one of those challenges that, to me, it isn't necessarily an East versus West thing. It really is a federal government, within 3 cities that has determined, for the rest of it. Cause I can promise you, in rural Ontario, we line up much more with our Western friends, than we do with a lot of the others.
Yeah, it's interesting times. Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the approval. Some would say finally, some would say unfortunately, the approval of the Bunge-Viterra merger. We're also going to talk about Evan's trip to Texas in the TPAP program. What did he learn there? You're listening to RealAg Radio, brought to you today by Vaderstad. RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues Panel with Kelvin Heppner and Lindsay Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by BASF and Syngenta Canada.
RealAg Issues Panel here on this Friday, brought to you today by Vaderstad. You can go to Vaderstad.com. We've got Andrew Campbell, dairy farmer out of Strathroy, Ontario, Fresh Air Media. Also does some podcast hosting, does a great job, and love having him here on the show. We have Evan Shout, who is with Farmer Coach, also host of the Truth About Ag podcast, as you see beside him if you're watching on YouTube. Also joining us is Kelvin Heppner, as he does every Friday here for the Issues Panel. Kelvin, this took a long time, right, is to see what Canada's position was going to be on the merger or acquisition, Bunge doing an acquisition of Viterra. And as Anita Nant is leaving, I guess she was trying to clear stuff off her desk. As you know, all of us do. We get piles on our desk, and I got to get through these piles. What is on my desk? And it's like, oh, this is still here, and it was the paperwork on that merger. It's approved, and it's going to go through from Canada's perspective. Farmers not happy. And I was having some beers with some farmers on was that Tuesday? That was Tuesday night. They were not happy. Give us the insight here. Why?
Well, there's a number of reasons, mainly that the conditions for this approval don't go far enough to address the concerns about reduced competition and reduced farm gate revenues as a result of this consolidation between two of the largest grain companies, grain handlers in the world here. In Saskatchewan, where you spent most of the week as well, Shaun, I think it's felt maybe even more acutely than in Alberta or Manitoba because of Viterra's history as the Sask wheat pool. Viterra has its head office in Regina, and so I think it's especially personal, felt in terms of the tradition and history of Saskatchewan agriculture as well. So, yeah, there's a bunch of conditions laid out in this approval. They have to sell 6 grain elevators, 5 or 4 of them here in Manitoba and 2 in Saskatchewan. Although they are not being required to sell any of the crush plants. That means, for example, here in Manitoba, we have 3 canola crush plants in Manitoba. All 3 are going to be owned and operated by Bunge when this deal closes, which is something that is somewhat surprising that that was allowed to happen. And the elevators that they're being required to sell, I've gained some more insight since this story broke earlier in the week. Most of these elevators are older, smaller operations, some of the less efficient elevators in the countryside. And so that's also not something that farmers were happy to hear. There's a bunch of legally binding controls on Bunge in terms of their stake in G3. One of the things that APAS, the Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan, and other farm groups had called for was the sale of Bunge's stake in G3. Bunge is a minority shareholder in G3, another grain company, and so they have been allowed to keep that stake, but with some protections in place in terms of having independent directors, that type of thing. So I'm not sure, the proof will have to be in the pudding there in terms of whether that works. Bunge or Viterra will also have to retain the Canadian head office in Regina for at least 5 years with a headcount of at least 200 people. So that's positive for Regina, at least in the short term. But again, people feeling like that's not something that may last. And then a few other requirements here. They have to look at the feasibility of expanding canola crush in Western Canada in the next 2 years, but there was no mention in terms of conditions regarding the big canola crush facility that Viterra announced for Regina back in 2021. It was supposed to be possibly the world's largest canola crush facility, and there was no mention of following through on construction of that. And a lot of people say that the combination of these two companies takes away the incentive for Bunge to build that plant that Viterra had announced. So there's a bunch of other conditions, more than 24 conditions laid out in the Order in Council, but those are some of the high level ones. And again, people, farm groups, Grain Growers of Canada and Canadian Federation of Agriculture saying that they don't go far enough.
Evan, what are you picking up from your crowd?
I'm picking up that I'm glad Kelvin did a lot more research into this than I probably know enough this week, but no, I mean, it's to be expected. Every time consolidation happens in the industry, whether it's in the elevator side, whether it's in the manufacturer side, it's going to bring about a whole bunch of producer angst. And I don't blame them. I mean, like you said, the crush plant in Regina, I mean, there's the whole bunch of intricate details with this that are going to monopolize a lot more. And that's the scare, right? And the agriculture industry on the producer side is not consolidating as fast as some of the retail side, which means we're getting less and less power when it comes to the sales, whether it comes to the purchasing. So it's a real reason is that our industry is keeping every small farms. We're not going to be able to compete when it comes against some of the retails and some of the elevators.
And Andrew, it seems that, I don't care where you go in Canada. If you ask a farmer or a rancher about, hey, are you concerned about consolidation? You get a pretty strong message. The answer is yes.
Oh, absolutely. And it is one of those things that, for all of us, even this time of year, it's so relevant when you're trying to make all of those plans for springs and you have the ability to go and you can, what are you offering? What are you offering? What are you offering? And what's that going to look like through the season? If all of a sudden there's one less, or particularly in a rural area, I think that's where consolidation is so much of a bigger problem, is that if the next one is 500 miles away, it takes even more of that incentive away. So I think it's one of those, challenges that I think we as growers do have when that consolidation happens. It's not just about, one big company and another across the country. It's about who's in your neighborhood. And now did you all of a sudden lose that competitor? That really stings for any producer.
That's where getting getting back to the canola crush example here in Manitoba, if we have all 3 crush plants owned by the same company, we're fortunate. We do have other options in terms of selling, but they are on the U.S. side of the border. And the irony of having this conversation and having this decision made in the broader environment right now, because if we have all 3, if we have a monopoly in terms of canola crush in the province, it could drive more canola sales and that value-added processing and the jobs south of the border via a Canadian government decision here.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. And it's also the murkiness of, go full scale back to where, the U.S. trade plan and what that could look like. Those crush facilities on the North Dakota side of the border need Canadian canola to be viable. And so that's U.S. jobs. So that's some of the leverage. And I'm sure it will be some of the discussion points that, as any of the premiers go to DC or anybody that's involved in whatever we're calling Team Canada, whenever they hand out the jerseys, that's going to be something they're going to talk about a lot. Is I was just in Pasco, Washington last week. There's a Tyson kill facility there. That slaughter plant is only viable if we're shipping Canadian live cattle to that plant, right? And so that's a factor in all of this, Kelvin.
And vice versa, the Bunge crush plant that I lived close to here in Altona has trucks coming up from North Dakota every single day. So
crushing beans?
Canola coming from North Dakota and Minnesota. So we're relying on the American canola to keep our crush plants viable here as well. And so that's where, the integrated aspect of these supply chains is something that we sure hope all the decision makers understand.
Yeah. On both sides of the border. Okay. Evan, you sent me a note that I found fascinating. So Texas A&M puts on this executive program. It's TPAP, right?
Yep.
And there's a lot of Canadians, obviously a lot of Americans that go to this. It's a very progressive, CEO thinking kind of farm owner. A very well-known program. They do a great job. Danny Kleinfelter was right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Before Danny passed on, it was his executive program, let's call it.
His thing. Okay. So what's interesting though is they do some testing on proficiencies. Yep. Talk about what some of the findings are and what the trend is, because this is fascinating.
Well, the interesting part is, like you said, it's a week long of drinking out of a fire hose. It is a very intensive program, 7 straight days down in Texas, and it's just based on business practices. So they start the first day by honestly giving you out a checklist and are you doing this on your farm? And every year, you fail it. Every farm I know has gone through it, has failed it, because honestly, when it comes to business practices, primary producer ag is not exactly competitive with other industries. And the interesting part this year is they actually went back and they pulled the stats over the last 20 years. And primary producer agriculture has either stagnated or actually gone backwards when it comes to true business practices in ag. And that might be financial, operational, HR, all those things that normal industries don't take, we take for granted, or they take for granted, but we are actually not making any progress on farming primary producer ag moving forward as acting as business.
Did they say why they feel? Because remember, this isn't a comment on the general pool.
Nope.
Although we could extrapolate that way. These are people that are participating in the TPAP program. So, this would be sort of the separating, the wheat from the chaff from a business practice standpoint. Did they provide any sort of insight on the why?
Well, first of all, you don't want to extrapolate that, because let's call this the top 20 to 30% of producers. And if those are the numbers, I'm scared of what the other side is. But when they're looking at it, the biggest thing is when times are good, and we've had a really good decade in ag, there hasn't been a necessity. Hard times create hard men, right? And so that saying alone, we haven't had to have those business practices in place. But then all of a sudden we wake up one day and prices don't look so good for next year, and things look a little tighter, and our risk management has gone way up because the numbers are way bigger. It takes these times to create kind of an urgency for it. So in the end, the industry hasn't forced it. Banks haven't forced accrual financials in a lot of areas, especially in the US, but in Canada as well. I've seen 15,000 acre grain farms that haven't had to do accrual financial statements. We're getting to the point where the industry has to start forcing it. And then on the other side, from education programs, the universities do a really poor job, and I'm not trying to name any schools out, but when it comes to actual business acumen in agriculture, the universities aren't caught up. I mean, you have some programs like Olds and Vermilion that are getting to it, but we are so far behind when it comes to education on the business side of primary producer ag.
Ooh, complacency. That's dangerous. You know, when we talk about complacency, I think right away of, the greatest football coach of all time in the college game, Nick Saban. And, complacency is bad, bad, bad. As he says, nobody owes you nothing. You could have talent, but if you don't have discipline, if you don't execute, you don't focus, you get nothing. If you're complacent and not paying attention to detail, what does that get you? Nothing. Complacency is bad, bad, bad. Are you, Andrew? Are you or Kelvin? Go ahead. I
was just going to make a quick comment. That applies to knowing your cost of production, and I was kind of surprised, especially in the environment that we are facing right now and have been over the last year. There's actually some. It looks like there's a reverse trend here in terms of knowing break-even points, cost of production, cash flow requirements. Evan?
Yeah, the stats are less than 40% of farms know their cost of production when they start marketing. So, I mean, and that's true cost of production. I mean, we can play around with cash or accrual. I don't care either way, but nobody's running the numbers.
Okay, so I'm thinking of a particular farmer. I'm not going to out him, but I will say whenever we talk about cost of production relative to marketing, he's like, why do I care what my cost of production is? I don't care. That has no impact for him. He sends me a text all the time. I love it because it's, it makes you sort of think, but he always talks about, why do I care about my cost of production? I care about my cost of production to be as low as possible for the productivity, but from a marketing standpoint, I really don't care what it is. Those two things are different. Campbell, what's your thoughts on this? Does this surprise you, or do you yeah, that makes sense?
No, it doesn't necessarily surprise me just from, you visit with farmers, you go to enough meetings, you kind of know where that mindset is. In terms of it going backwards does actually surprise me, Evan, just because you think, especially going into a time like this, and maybe part of that is we especially in, the grain market, things have been strong for a number of years. Does that make you all of a sudden go, oh, well, we don't have to look at as carefully because we know, that as long as we kind of get an average yield, we're going to at least make money. I don't know if that's one of the reasons, and whether because we're going into, times that are going to be quite a bit leaner, that maybe that comes back. But I think the challenge is the reason that you would have to come back and start looking at your cost of production is because the numbers went bad the year before or a couple of years before. And now I think the challenge is the money gets to be so big compared to what it was before that those losses are really, really hard to recover from if you don't know. And to speak with, I'm going to disagree if you don't know what your cost of production is, because if all of a sudden those markets move and you say, okay, is today the day that I'm actually going to sell something? Do you have an idea whether it's black or red? I think you've got to know what that is. Particularly into the times that we're headed in for the next couple of years, I think.
Okay, we're out of time, but hey, guess what? We get to continue this discussion because we're going to do a bonus segment. Okay, I ran into so many fans of this show this week at Saskatoon, and here's what I heard: keep on doing the bonus segments. Love it, because I love hearing the discussion go a little bit further. So we're going to do that. Hey, Andrew, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thanks.
Evan, great to see you again, and appreciate it, bud.
As always.
Kelvin, I'm just going to talk to you multiple times per day. So it's good.
Cool.
Enjoy that clipper. Enjoy that clipper. Okay. For those of you on Rural Radio, if you have any feedback, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. For those of you listening to the RealAg Radio podcast, stay tuned for more right after this. Thanks so much for everybody getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and big shout out and thank you to our sponsor today, Vaderstad. Check them out at Vaderstad.com.
Thank you for downloading this RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by AIM EC Herbicide from FMC. Fast-acting AIM EC Herbicide is the go-to tank mix for the hottest spring burn-off of the toughest weeds. Plus, get $4 off per acre with the ACE Resistant Weeds program. Visit ag.fmc.com for more.
Whew, that was great. Time flies. This is nice. I like being able to do the bonus segment because we just aren't able to squeeze it all in. We're joined today by Kelvin Heppner, Andrew Campbell, and Evan Shout. If you do have any thoughts, questions, suggestions, we do want to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Also, great. It was great to have Vaderstad as our sponsor here today. Make sure you do check them out. If we don't have the sponsors, we don't have a show. Sorry, everybody. We have the audience, but you got to have the sponsors. So please check out Vaderstad.com. Now, Evan, I cut you off. We were talking about some of the farm management stuff. What were you going to say?
I think and to Andrew's point, I mean, over 2014 in grain production, we probably saw the biggest loss of actual cash flow or profit from March 1st to December 31st that we've had in any 1 year, just based on not future selling. So I mean, if you sold before March, you actually probably had a decent year, even if yields were average. But I mean, there was still only about 10% of the canola in Western Canada sold going into harvest this year. So you watch the price go from 16 down to, I mean, we were almost at 13 for a point in time. I think we're getting closer back to 14, but it's knowing the cost of production allows you to pull the trigger on that, because you actually are like, well, it's 15. I make 20% return at 15. I'm selling some of it. So that's where I see the big holdup is, if you don't know your cost of production, you're just going off gut feel, and gut feel today versus gut feel 10 years ago, the cost of production is about $150 different. So it's not the same gut.
Yeah. Well, we saw the USDA report last week that boom, shot that market higher.
Oh,
that was a nice shot in the arm.
Yeah.
So to speak. I think for a lot of producers, I do think, we talk about complacency at the end of the show there, and I do think that plays a role. It requires that discipline when things are really good to kind of stick with, knowing all the numbers, because it can be so easy. We do, this is human nature. We do this in our own personal lives. Let's be honest. Right? Hey, I got a raise, or hey, we had a good year last year. Let's, go. We can go on that vacation, and we just sort of make qualitative decisions without some of the analytics. Sometimes I think it's just human nature. Now there's like a special group of people that apply that discipline in their lives all the time. Boring. But for the rest of us, we're Kelvin's laughing because I wasn't talking about you, Kelvin. I was not talking about you.
Oh, yeah. Well, but I think like you said, it's human nature to focus on the biggest fires that you got to put out. And if you know that you're profitable, you're not focusing on it, but that is detrimental in the long term when you're back into a situation like we are now, where you need to know what your cost of production is. And it's good to kind of have that all top of mind and have your historical numbers right in front of you when making all those decisions.
Yeah.
Because I think it is one of those, when you talk about where that focus, that is probably, it maybe isn't necessarily complacency. It's a change in focus to, I know for a lot of us around here, because you were profitable, the focus was entirely on how are we going to push yield? What can we do? You've got a little bit of space. You have a little bit of space to play around with some inputs. What can you do? And all of a sudden that maybe becomes the focus. You don't have more time in a day. And then at the end of the year, you go, well, good thing we made money. Let's do that again next year. And then in a year like this, now all of a sudden it just creates that change that says, okay, we have to change the way how we've run that business over the last couple of years. Or else we're going to be in trouble. And unfortunately, I really do believe for too many people that realization is going to come too late. And it's going to hurt.
One of the things that I've noticed is I've talked about cost cutting in my presentations, and as you get feedback from producers, afterwards, there is a lack, and people have regret on this. They're like, I wish I knew. Is like not having an idea on the incremental benefit of a decision, and so they've been adding things, and so I'm thinking more agronomically. Okay, so adding things agronomically. And they look at it in the aggregate benefit as opposed to being able to figure out what the incremental benefit was. And so as we look at removing costs, you're really in the dark when it comes to okay, I've been using that product. I don't know, I don't know. Does it, if I cut it out, am I actually hurting myself from a yield standpoint? Those are the kind of finer details that I think are missing for some people. And I talked to a producer yesterday in Saskatoon that, pretty much laid that out for me, that they realize they need to do more on-farm field trials for some of the products they're using.
We see it on the input side. We also see it on the insurance side. I mean, a lot of guys will not even think twice about spending $20 on a fungicide to save a canola crop. but to pay $20 for an insurance policy that might actually keep you from losing money, well, that's not as, let's say the word sexy, or it's not as pertinent, but it's essentially making sure you don't go backwards. So we've seen that a lot. And then, like you said, on the input side, guys always, for some reason, go to inputs and there's a brand new combine or tractor sitting on the lot and they're like, well, I need that. But that's the place where you cut on years like this.
Yeah, fair enough. I just want to switch gears here because I got to ask Kelvin. I want to know, what was your impression this week, yesterday, of Mark Carney, who apparently is from Edmonton? Nobody in Edmonton knew, but apparently he's from Edmonton.
Yeah, he was born in the Northwest Territories and grew up in Edmonton, I think is what he said. So, yeah.
The guy claims a lot of territory. There was a video that surfaced that he talks about, as a European, but he does have a UK and Irish citizenship, which I don't think we should hold against. He's done a lot of work overseas. The challenges of denouncing some of that is going to be, if he does try to become, or he does become prime minister for the short period of time here before the election. But anyway, sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead, Kelvin.
Well, I think he's intelligent. That we can't take away from him. And he has a long list of accomplishments, certainly. But to me, there's an obvious political movement, not only in Canada, around the world, where people are not happy with the status quo and they're not happy with the institutions that got us here. And here we have somebody who was the head of a central bank in not just one, but two countries, kind of like right the definition of somebody who led the current institutions that led us into this economic situation that we're in. And the other option, in looking like Chrystia Freeland is going to declare here over the weekend officially, she was the deputy leader of the party and the finance minister. So in many ways, it just feels like this Liberal leadership race is doubling down on the status quo. And then another thing Carney talked about, and this is another area where I can give him some respect, because he talked about how he prefers to not speak in sound bites, how he prefers comprehensive plans. And as a policy nerd, I appreciate that. But that doesn't work in today's political environment.
I'm glad you identify that.
Like, who have won politically in North America in the last 20, 30 years? You had Harper talked about a 5-point plan. He had everything boiled down to 5 points. We had Obama. He talked about messages about change. It was very clear, very simplified messaging. Trump and Make America Great Again, build the wall. Like Poilievre is doing that with Axe Attacks, build the homes. And here we have Carney talking about how he prefers comprehensive plans, and I don't see how that is going to resonate with voters. So I'm kind of bewildered as to the strategy that, and that the Liberal Party hasn't figured some of this stuff out in terms of the vast resource, or like the Liberal Party itself is a deep institution that should be able to find people that can acknowledge these trends are happening, or is it just too much stubbornness to recognize this? I'm not sure.
I'm curious on how, because remember, there's history between Carney and Freeland. And so the two of them battling it out. What's that?
Carney is the godfather of Freeland's son. So,
I did not know that.
Yeah.
This is gonna be fun.
Yeah. Well, and how are they going to differentiate themselves? They're both talking now about, or at least leaking, that they would be okay with removing the consumer carbon tax that they have both been staunch advocates for the last 5-10 years. So how are they going to differentiate themselves? That's another thing I'm curious, where is the difference going to be in terms of their messaging and positioning to Liberal Party voters?
Campbell, thoughts?
I don't know why you would want this job. Like, everything about it says, like, do you really, does it mean so much to you that you want to say you were prime minister for 3 weeks, that you are willing to spend $350,000 just to get started, and then a whole campaign along with it, because
and give up your seat on a bunch of investment funds and boards?
All of that. What makes you think that this is the time? Like, is it one of those things of, well, I at least just want to add it to my resume so I can be on a bigger board? Like, that's the only thing, because the idea that you are going to come out as prime minister past, I don't know, 1st of May, at this point looks like absolutely zero. And it really comes down to, as Kelvin said, when you look at what they're going to campaign against, or what they're going to campaign for, it's I find it just entertaining when I'm staunchly opposed to this thing I implemented. Like, I don't understand how that line of messaging will work with any Canadian. So good for them for doing it. Somebody's got to stand up and say, I'm going to want to do it. I would have let the guy from Montreal that I can't remember his name be it, because then at least you can have a better shot once this election goes on. No, they're actually Bayless. Does that sound like
Bayless? He's still in the running.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. That's the thing. Let him do it. Let him do it. Let him have the job. Then you can let that implode and then start up again after the election. But we've seen it from the Conservatives. It's going to take 2 or 3 election cycles before the Liberal Party actually has a breath of life.
I agree. Yes, I've been saying the exact same thing. And you'd think the party, if they had strategy, like maybe this shows that there's lack of strategy here. If you thought that Carney or Freeland was your best bet longer term, okay, you're putting in a sacrificial lamb. Somebody's raising the money for some schmuck to take the loss. Now, I would argue it should have been Trudeau that took the loss.
Yes.
The whole fact that we have delayed all of this with everything that's going on in the United States, the fact that we have delayed this because the Liberals want to have a leadership race is you want to talk about not being on Team Canada? You want to talk about not doing what's best for the country? Liberals, I'm looking at you.
I 100% agree with that.
Okay.
A, I love politics. B, I'm not shocked. And C, Kelvin, your point of he's very intelligent. This is probably the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
The way he rolled himself.
That's what I got. That's what I got.
Yeah, I'm like Campbell. I don't understand the motivation. I don't.
Well, and the only motivation I can see is you think that you have you can make a case after the election for that it wasn't as bad as it could have been with me at the helm, and you win a leadership review. I don't think that's possible because the latest stats I saw put the Bloc Québécois as official opposition status. And if they're official opposition status, there's a 0% chance whoever doesn't pass a leadership review.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who's
Okay.
going to be left to do the leadership review, though? You might be standing there by yourself.
It's being left by the Prime Minister how he found it.
Yeah,
right.
It's kind of weird. An aberration in the long term trajectory of the Liberal Party of Canada. Trudeau may have been an aberration.
Huh. Chew on that for a little bit. Here's what I'm worried about from the Conservative standpoint is that, and this happens from outside the bubble. You can see this when you're inside and you got the big lead. We were talking about complacency earlier. Okay. You misinterpret the lead you have in the polls that people love you and your policy, as opposed to are people more thinking, I just want the other guy out, right? We need change. And I think that's going to be a real challenge for the Conservatives when they have this kind of a lead. Kelvin, is that fair?
Oh, they don't. Yeah, exactly. Right now, where the Conservatives are at in the polls and the projected seat counts, they really only have ground to lose. And losing Trudeau as the opposition that they're running against won't help their. There will be some. I expect there will be some bounce to the Liberal fortunes here, not to maybe even get them past the Bloc for second place in terms of the final seat count. But yeah, the Conservatives would have preferred to run against Trudeau in an election.
Yeah.
Okay. As closely tied as Freeland and Carney both are to Trudeau, and of course that's the Conservative messaging that we're seeing now too.
Yeah, I was going to ask everybody, what are you looking out for next week? But I imagine most of us are just saying what happens post inauguration. Is there anything else we'll be watching next week besides that one? That's what I thought.
It's been a long time where we've had this type of. And the word uncertainty gets thrown around way too much in our industry. But to me, it's been a long time since we've been this close in terms of the calendar to such an uncertain number of outcomes. There's just such a wide range of possible outcomes in the coming weeks here in terms of scenarios that we're facing.
Yeah. Yeah, Evan, you agree with that, or?
Yeah, for me, I was going to say I want to see Snowgate in Buffalo for the Ravens and Bills game. That's about all I got.
I feel football's still going. It's always sad when football's over in my mind, but Kelvin's got the Leafs. So, Campbell, is that your team?
Yeah, unfortunately. It is. It's one of those that every game win, you see them and you think, my goodness, especially this season, there's just something about every win is like, gosh, I can feel it. And then, I mean, they won last night, but the loss against Dallas, you're just like, we don't have a chance.
Yeah. It's got to be painful.
Oh, man.
Evan, who's your team?
I'm a Capitals fan, so I'm just watching Ovechkin get the record. That's what I'm waiting for.
So this is interesting, and maybe this is where we wrap up. But I actually hope he breaks the record. Like
21 more.
Yeah, like he's going to, right? Like, yeah. And where is he? Where is he on the Mount Rushmore, so to speak, of hockey players all time? Where I kind of think that most people don't appreciate enough how bloody good he has been.
Well, and he's third in the league history in hits as well. When was the last? You're gonna have the leading scorer of the league of all time also be third in hits. That is not something normal.
Yeah, well, Gretzky didn't do that. Crosby's definitely not doing that. I think he's the most exciting player I have ever seen live. Most exciting.
Recently or years ago?
Well, I'm going back when I was a Flame season ticket holder. So I'm thinking I'm thinking like 07, 05.
He doesn't have to come back across the red anymore as long as he keeps scoring.
That's what I find most impressive about the last couple of years is he's playing like a senior men's hockey player out there. He's skating like a senior men's hockey player or Bush League player and still putting in 21 goals or whatever he's at this year. Like that shot and just like finesse that he still has at that age.
And I'm leading the league right now. The Capitals are real.
Huh. Not good for your Leafs, Campbell. Not good for your Leafs.
I'm used to it.
Well, you know what, gang, this has been fantastic.
Not normal.
Yeah. Campbell, I actually met your co-host for the dairy podcast that you're doing.
Oh, Sarah Sash.
Yes. We were at the where were we? Ag Excellence Conference. The Canada one in Abbotsford.
Yeah. Oh, awesome.
Yep. She was on the show, and I didn't realize it till afterwards, and it was like this. Why didn't you say so? So yeah, she was really good.
Sarah is wonderful. She was also in Ontario for our meeting this week, so it's always great to get perspectives on agriculture in BC. We talk about kind of that west to east differences. Then there's BC agriculture, and it's another world again.
Yeah, over 200 different commodities produced in that province, my friends. It's talk about diversity. What's the name of that podcast, Andrew?
Canadian Pod Cow.
Play on words there.
Yeah, obviously.
Evan, the Truth About Ag, farmer coach, Maverick Ag. It was great to have you back on here, bud.
You betcha. I always appreciate it.
Great stuff. And Kelvin, this is I started to bug you about the Leafs. I know but you get to bug me about the Bears, which, my Lord, is that coaching hire a mess? Like, only the Bears could have the number one quarterback pick from a year ago and look so quickly like they are trying to ruin the guy's career. It is just like the Bears are in full Bears mode right now. It is so embarrassing and disheartening. Anyway, Kelvin, have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Okay, everybody, if you do have any feedback, we do want to hear from you, okay? All our perspectives, commentary, really appreciate everybody being, just providing their opinions. It's great stuff, but the panel isn't the only one that gets to do that. You get to, too. Make sure you send us an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or the RealAg feedback line is 855-776-6147. Make sure you tune into The Agronomist Monday night, 8 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Mountain. It is 7 o'clock for you in Saskatchewan. Okay. I talked to a few Saskatchewan farmers this week. There's confusion about time zones. So right now you're on Central Time, everybody. Okay. Central Time. So if I say 7 Central, 7 o'clock Saskatchewan. Evan and I had a good laugh about this yesterday.
You revolve around us.
That is true. Yes. It's sort of like you're trying to be like Ontario. Everybody have a great weekend. Cheers.